Have you ever read John Ortberg's book? The title is kind of long. It's called something along the lines of "When the game is over, everything goes back into the box." And in that book, he describes a time in his childhood when he used to play Monopoly with his grandmother. His grandmother taught him to play Monopoly, and she was really good at Monopoly. And she wasn't like a lot of modern day people in the fact that she wanted to give her little grandson false victories and therefore build up his esteem in that way. She wanted him to learn to earn victories. And so she played the game, and she was kind of cutthroat at it, and she won every time. And at the end of every game, she would tell her grandson, John, "Someday you'll learn to play the game." Well, that someday finally came. He played Monopoly with one of his best friends, it seemed like all summer long, and he got really good at the game. He became cutthroat himself. He learned that the secret of the game in Monopoly was that you had to take everything. You had to be absolutely committed to taking every property, every house, every hotel, every scrap of money before you could win the game. And he committed himself to do that. And then after the summer was over that fall, he challenged his grandmother to another game of Monopoly, and he wiped her out. He said he not only won the game, not only beat her in the game, but he also beat her emotionally and psychologically. He absolutely dominated her. And of course, the little boy gloated after that. He had his celebration, and his grandma patiently waited for him to get through. And finally she said, "That's all well and good, but remember, when the game is over, everything goes back into the box." Well, there's a lesson there for us, isn't there? We get caught up in this physical life. Very often this life becomes little more than a paper chase. We're chasing after awards, we're chasing after degrees, we're chasing after stock certificates, we're chasing after money and deeds. But when the game is over, when you draw that last breath, it's over. You don't get to take anything with you. Everything does go back into the box, and in fact, your body will go back into a box as well. There was a particular book within the Bible that I really thought I understood when I was a teenager and a young adult, and I kind of identified with it. It was the book of Ecclesiastes by King Solomon. Ecclesiastes starts off this way. King Solomon says, "Meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless, utterly meaningless." And then he starts to talk about the futility of life and how everything that you have ends up just kind of going back to the same thing that it always was. And he really concluded that this life was just vanity. It was empty. And as a teenager, again, I kind of identify with that because I thought I knew everything, and I decided long before I got too far into my adult years that life was just a joke, that we just all did the same thing, we just all chased after things in futility, but for what purpose? So I really thought I identified with Solomon. It wasn't until years later that I really started studying the book of Ecclesiastes, after having studied the rest of the Bible, that I realized that when Solomon was talking about the meaninglessness of life, he was talking about the physical pursuits. Whenever he talked about the spiritual pursuits, he pointed out that this was where the true meaning of life was. And just as at the end of life we'll return to dust that we were made from, all of our physical things will be over. Everything will go back into the box, but spiritually we'll continue. And Solomon is trying to reach us in Ecclesiastes, or God through Solomon's writing is trying to get our attention to the point that if all we're doing in this life is going after the physical things, we're missing the point. We need to be living for God because we are not here for just a short time when we talk about our souls. We're here forever. We're eternal. Our physical life is very short. It's finite. It's like the game of Monopoly. You play the game and at some point somebody wins and the game's over. But that's not the way it is with your soul. Your soul's going to go on. What then? The wise man will ask. And so here is the sobering conclusion. If all we do in life is run after the physical things, that cute girl, if you're a guy, or that cute guy if you're a girl, the state trophies, the different awards that men long for, the different recognitions that they go after, the big properties and the fancy cars and all the nice things that money can buy. If that's the focus of our life, we're going to find, like Solomon did at the end, that life is meaningless. Because Solomon as king was given more wealth than any other king in Israel's history before him, and certainly after him as well. He had it all when it came to physical things. He had a harem because he delighted in many women, and so he went after many women. And a lot of men would think, well, that's the life for me. But Solomon found out that that was very empty. And Solomon went after great accomplishments. And he accomplished a handful of things that were pretty impressive. But looking back on it, Solomon realized that it wasn't accomplishments, physical accomplishments, that were of the true value in this life. It was where you stood before God. It was whether you were an effective servant of God. That means, were you a good spouse? Were you a good friend? Were you a good employee or a good employer? Did you lift people up and encourage them? Do you help people through life? Do you help people draw closer to God? Or are you like so many people in this life where it's like somebody rings a bell and you start climbing that ladder to success, and it doesn't matter who you pull down in front of you, just as long as you can keep on getting to the top, and finally you've pulled down that last man and you're at the top of the ladder, you're the top rung. You win the prize. You get to ring the bell. You die with the most toys, but what then? Because the moment you cease drawing breath, everything goes back into the box, except your soul. Your soul is you. Whoever you are now in your physical body is who you will be for eternity. It's who you'll be when you kneel before God on Judgment Day. And when you kneel before God on Judgment Day, you're going to find out whether the things that you did in this life were things that God considered as worthy. It's not because you can somehow earn heaven and earn your salvation. You can't do that. God will save you by His grace. But you have to accept His terms. And you can certainly earn hell. The Bible's very clear on that. And so what we need to do in this life is, I believe, focus first and foremost upon God and upon His things. That means we dig into the Word of God and we find out everything we can so that we can seek to please Him to the best of our ability. And then we help others along the way do the same. Because at the end, when it comes to the physical things, they are meaningless. They do go back into the box. But the spiritual things, the things that count, love, joy, and peace, those things that when you share them with others actually increase. When you share friendship with others, when you share joy with others, when you share patience and peace with others, these things increase. But the things that decrease when you share them, those are the meaningless things. When you split your money, when you split your property, when you split anything physical, it decreases when you share it. There has to come a point in our life where we understand that those things that are of true value are those things which, when we share them, they become larger, not smaller. And if you figured that out, and if you're going in that direction, Then because you're no longer going after the meaningless physical things, then life is no longer meaningless. It has great meaning to you. And then there will be an eternity with God someday, because you have learned to go from the meaningless to the meaningful. You've learned to go from playing a game to living the life that God called you to. In the end, when we talk about physical things, everything goes back into the box. Have you been working for those things that are someday going to go back into a box? Or are you living for life eternal? Something to think about, isn't it? Appreciate your listening today. I hope this gives you something to think about. If you liked it, do me a favor, hit that like button. It'll help get it to more people. If you have comments, please share those with me. I'm always interested to hear what you have to say on that. But again, thank you for listening today, and we'll see you next time.